Hello, Miss Ricardo and Miss Guider's class. I'm excited for us to start our first official week of online e-learning. And in math this week, we are going to start our new unit on measurement. So I wanted to read you one of my favorite measurement stories, and it kind of just gives us an idea about why we need measurement. And just to give you an idea of what that is when we talk about measurement, we're thinking about length. And when we're doing this unit, because we know there's other types of measurement like volume and weight and so forth, but we're going to think about length, and length is how long or how far an object is, and there's different ways that we measure them by. So the story we're going to read together today is How Big is a Foot? And when we're done, I have a little activity for you to do on your own, and you can do it with your family if you want, to kind of think about why we use a specific type of measurement. How big is a foot? Once upon a time, there lived a king and his wife, the queen. They were a happy couple, for they had everything in the world. However, when the queen's birthday came near, the king had a problem. What could he give to someone who had everything? The king thought and he thought and he thought, until suddenly he had an idea. He would give the queen a bed. The queen did not have a bed because at that time, beds had not been invented. Ugh. So even someone who had everything did not have a bed. The king called his prime minister and asked him to please have a bed made. The prime minister called the chief carpenter and asked him to please have a bed made. The chief carpenter called the apprentice and told him to make a bed. How big is a bed? Asked the apprentice, who didn't know because at the time nobody had ever seen a bed. How big is a bed? The carpenter asked the prime minister. A good question, said the prime minister. And he asked the king, how big is a bed? Many questions. The king thought and he thought and he thought until suddenly he had an idea. The bed must be big enough to fit the queen. The king called the queen and he told her to put on her new pajamas and told her to lie on the floor. I wonder what he's going to do. The king took off his shoes and with his big feet, he walked carefully around the queen. He counted that the bed must be 3 feet wide and 6 feet long to be big enough to fit the queen, including the crown which the queen sometimes liked to wear to sleep. She's a fancy queen. The king said thank you to the queen and told the prime minister, who told the chief carpenter, who told the apprentice, the bed must be 3 feet wide and 6 feet long to be big enough to fit the queen, including the crown which she sometimes liked to wear to sleep. The apprentice said thank you and took off his shoes, and with his little feet he measured 3 feet wide and 6 feet long. Think about the king's feet were really, really big, and the apprentice's feet are really, really little. And he made a bed to fit the queen. When the king saw the bed, he thought it was beautiful, and he could not wait for the queen to see it. Instead, he called the queen at once and told her to put on her new pajamas. Then he brought out the bed and told the queen to try it. But the bed was much too small for the queen. The king was so angry that he immediately called the prime minister, who called the chief carpenter, who called the jailer, who threw the apprentice into the jail. The apprentice was unhappy. Why was the bed too small for the queen? Sorry, almost skipped the picture for you guys. Oh, wait. There you go. He thought about it, and he thought and he thought. until suddenly he had an idea. A bed that was 3 king's feet wide and 6 king's feet long was naturally bigger than a bed that was 3 apprentice feet wide and 6 apprentice feet long. I can make a bed to fit the queen if I know the size of the king's foot. He explained this to the jailer, who explained it to the chief carpenter, who explained it to the prime minister, who explained it to the king, who was much too busy to go to the jail. Instead, the king took off one shoe and called a famous sculptor, and the sculptor made an exact marble copy of the king's foot. This was sent to the jail. The apprentice took the marble copy of the king's foot, and with it he measured 3 feet wide and 6 feet long, and built a bed to fit the queen. The bed was ready just in time for the queen's birthday. The king called the queen and told her to put on her new pajamas. Then he brought out the new bed and told the queen to try it. The queen got in the bed and the bed fit the queen to perfection, including the crown which she sometimes liked to wear to sleep. It was, without a doubt, the nicest gift the queen had ever received. The king was very happy. He immediately called the apprentice from jail and made him a royal prince. He ordered a big parade, and all the people came out to cheer the little apprentice prince. And forever after, anyone who wanted to measure anything used a copy of the king's foot. And when somebody said, "My bed is 6 feet long and 3 feet wide," everybody knew exactly why. All right, so the activity that I would like you to try to do is I want you to take a sheet of paper. It can be any kind of paper, guys. It can even just be a sheet of paper that you take out of your notebook. And what you're gonna do, this is gonna be a little silly. You're gonna take your paper, you're gonna put it on the ground, and you're gonna put your foot on top of it. And then you're gonna trace around your foot. Once you've traced your foot, I want you to take scissors and I want you to cut it out. Now I have already done this. So I've traced my foot. And if you are smart and you can compare it to a ruler, I'd like you to compare it to a ruler. But if you can also get someone in your house to do this too with you, I want you to compare your feet and see how they're similar and how they're different. And then if you have a ruler, I want you to see how it compares. So if I had the king's foot, which I actually have a copy of the king's foot, and I was told to make a bed that was 3 king's feet long and 6 king's feet high, and I used my foot, would it come out the same? So that's why we have to use the same types of measurement and units so that we know we're measuring things accurately. All right, guys, enjoy your activity.